Let's crack on to the bad of this week. And unfortunately, we're going back in time to a topic we just spoke about minutes ago, and that is the New York Giants that did lose again in Munich, Germany. Lost 2017, like we said, in overtime against the Panthers. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about how they're playing at the minute, and also just about what the aims are now for this point of the season. Because Johnny, when I was there, a big thing that everyone was saying in the stadium, you could tell, is why don't we bench Daniel Jones now? Why don't we just bench Daniel Jones now? And I mean, I am repeating myself a little bit from yesterday's show, but this is how things go sometimes when you have a big game like that abroad. But I could not understand why that opinion would be the case, because why? Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito, what are they going to bring to the table? What have we seen from them that is different to Daniel Jones? And at this point, when you've got this many wins, what would be the point of that? What do you think to that? Because there was a lot of people saying that, and I was a bit like, I don't get why.
I think there's a lot of reasons, and fundamentally is that Daniel Jones has been probably the worst quarterback in the NFL so far this season. I think playing him and risking him getting injured, as bad as it sounds, risks them, perhaps having to pay him, the full entirety of his contract. I unfortunately think that Daniel Jones has, is about to play his last snap for the Giants. They've obviously got the bye this week, and Brian Dable's been very clear that there are going to be some, or they're going to consider, and there are going to be some changes. This is a coach who, I think, despite having a good fortune first year or so, is now very much on the hot seat. He's got to try and win football games, and Daniel Jones is not putting them in a great position. But this goes further than the player, the head coach. The Giants are, have lost the most games of any franchise in the NFL, I think, since 2000, 2016, 2017. They consistently get top decisions wrong. If you look at the draft classes over the last 2-3 years, okay, we obviously can't take into consideration this year, but look at the amount of receivers that they've drafted quite highly up, and how productive these guys are. High picks like Evan Neal. I even think Thibodeau is fairly overrated. I think they are, the general manager is, obviously we've spoken a lot on this podcast as well about Saquon leaving, and that decision. And I think they're a franchise which has, over the last few years, not got anything right. And I think a big chunk of that, unfortunately, is Daniel Jones's contract. I mean, even after after that 1 year, I think it was it 2022 season where Jones, stepped up, and the Giants dragged themselves into the playoffs. They got a playoff win against the Vikings.
They went 9-7 that year, and that was the year that Daboll won the head coach of the year.
Exactly, head coach of the year. Daniel Jones is seemingly back. He's been given time to develop, but not anymore. Unfortunately, I think it's well and truly over for Jones. What do they do? Coming to the draft, they're going to be picking in the top 5 at this rate. You take a quarterback then, or is it all about selling off your assets? So some of the big players, and trying to rebuild a little bit. There's obviously a certain Manning who will potentially be available the year after. If you try and chase him a little bit and focus on other areas, I don't know. I just feel that the Giants are a real dumpster truck, unfortunately, and I largely blame the decision making from the top. And fundamentally, the decision to keep Daniel Jones has ultimately cost them, a fair few years in development and progressing this team. Because as I say, there are good players around him, particularly on defense. I think they've got a good defense when they're playing well, but yeah, I think there's got to be major changes for the Giants this off season.
So we don't really like to say the T word on this podcast, James, but I mean, you look at it now, they're at the minute of the second pick at 2-8. There's still 4 other teams with 2 wins and there's 6 teams with 3 wins. But when you look at their schedule, if I can just get the schedule up here for the Giants, they are hosting Tampa Bay, at Dallas, hosting New Orleans, hosting Ravens, at Atlanta, hosting the Colts, at the Eagles. I mean, what is there, potentially 1 win in there? Really? Two wins, maybe. And that would be Dallas and New Orleans. That would be the only ones I would see them as maybe having a chance at winning there. But at that point, you could come off the bye week, you lose to Tampa Bay, you go 2-9. At that point, aren't you like, well, we're not fighting for anything here. We're fighting for wins. Do you think the organisation may feel like they have a responsibility to change something, whether that bench Jones or get rid of the coach or something like that? But really, there is an underlying of like, well, we don't really want to win a game for the rest of the year because we could get such a high draft pick and potentially take a quarterback.
Yeah, this is going to be a really difficult balancing act now I mean, Mara's come out and said that he doesn't anticipate making any changes during the season or in the off season with regards to Daboll and Joe Schoen. And I would be so surprised if those 2 guys were there at the end of the year. It feels like this is just going to be a complete wipeout. Get somebody else in, draft somebody at quarterback and see what you can do from there. If Daboll is to stay, I don't think Daboll's a bad head coach. I think bad decisions have been made above him. But how does Daboll go about this now? So you're saying about benching Daniel Jones, and you were saying why. Well, one reason why maybe you don't is if you are going for the T word that we don't like, that he's playing so badly that you might just want to carry on keeping playing badly.
That's my argument. And you're paying him loads of money, so you might as well pay him loads of money to play badly if you want the high draft pick.
Yeah. Where are you going to move him to? I mean, I don't know who would want him. Obviously, there might be that sort of situation whereby he moves and does a Darnold and sits and then comes back and is regenerated, and he's still got good legs and stuff. He can still move about. He's a big guy, and it's not that his arm is terrible. It's strong. There are qualities there to like, but maybe it's just like when he first went there, everybody said in this New York market's going to eat you alive, and he's a really sort of quiet, low-key guy, and he just doesn't seem to fit. But Daboll's got to try and keep the locker room if he wants to stay. So what do? Do you address the T word in the room and just sort of acknowledge it wholeheartedly and go, look, this is what we're doing now. This is going to be the plan. We'll reset, we'll reboot, we'll go again, and I'll make sure that I build something more competitive next year, and we'll get back on track? Or does he try and win, because that's the only way to keep the locker room happy, by trying as hard as you can, even if obviously it only accumulates 2 more wins for the rest of the year, and guys can see that he's trying, and I don't know. Only really the owner can address the team and say, look, now I want you guys to carry on, suck in for the rest of the year, because I just need to reset this whole thing, and I need as much draft capital as we can, and let's see if we can get that number 1 pick. We'll be up there anyway. Maybe we can trade into it, but there's going to be a few teams that are going to want to do that. I could see my team being one of them as well, because they're going to be there or thereabouts. So it's going to be quite competitive in a not wholly rich QB draft class. I think 2, maybe 3 guys at the most I can only see going first round at the moment. But obviously desperation kicks in, and a few more go. But I don't know. It just feels like bad decision making at the top for years now, and that's got to change. And maybe Daboll can cling onto his job, but I don't know if Joe Schoen can. He's the guy who I would be, if I'm in that organization at the moment. He is if I'm him, I'm sort of I've got half my stuff in a box, just sort of squirreled away in the cupboard, just in case they give me the boot and they want to get out of there double time. You know, it's a really toxic market as well. Once it starts going badly, the New York market, you don't get a lot of leeway, and they expect wins. They expect, you know, to be, because they are that storied franchise, if you like, especially in that area. They expect results, and they expect them quickly. And it looked like Daboll was on the right track in his first year with Daniel Jones, and it fell apart really quickly. And I think, was it so it wasn't after the first year, it was the second year that they then gave Daniel Jones the contract, and everybody was just scratching their heads then. And you could see it wasn't working. And I'd love to know who exactly that decision fell to and who signed that off, because that felt like the first nail in the coffin for someone. And again, I think that's going to be predominantly Joe Shane. So I expect changes, even though Mara's saying not. I think that's perhaps just a bit of bravado. He's probably, I mean, he has changed a lot recently as well, and he's been quite open in saying, I don't like too much change. I want to try and keep consistency. That is how good franchises build. But when it ain't working, what else do you do?
I think the biggest thing will be that Daboll never picks Daniel Jones. That's always going to be a big thing. Yeah. That's always going to be a thing of what maybe is sort of his armor at the minute is like, you know, I didn't pick a lot of these players, or I wasn't here when this happened. And so, yeah, you can probably get away with that a little bit to a certain extent, but at the same time, you know, you've got to take that responsibility. And it's excuse me, sorry.
Yeah,
it's a very.
Sorry, in games where they started different QBs over the last couple of years, they had Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito. He still went 5-6. You know, it's not like his record with other guys has been amazing either. I mean, I know that there are guys like DeVito was a no-name guy when he started, and he was a bit of he's still got that cult hero status there, but he isn't. You know, he might get the fan base going for a little while, but he's not like setting the world on fire. And Tyrod Taylor was Tyrod Taylor. You knew what he was, very safe, very middle of the road. So 5-6 with those guys. Daboll's supposed to be came in as this really offensive-minded guy, and you're just not seeing a lot of that either. So I don't. The reasons for keeping Daboll are consistency. And then after that, I'm not seeing a lot else, because stylistically on the field, the product they're putting out there visually feels really, really far behind everywhere else.
Well,